So you've decided you're going to take the Part 107 test and you don't want to spend a ton of money, then you are definitely in the right place. Later in this video, I will definitely talk about the 5 big tips that I used to pass my exam, and I got a 95%, which means I got 3 questions wrong, and that's it. Look in the description, and there will be time codes in there, and you can go ahead and skip ahead to the part where I talk about tips for studying for the exam, as well as some specifics about exactly what you should look at. Those of you who have no idea what Part 107 is, this first part of the video is definitely for you. Part 107, the tests and the associated license, all it is, it's a license that allows you to fly drones, unmanned aerial vehicles commercially in the United States. I'll admit that when I first started this process of looking into Part 107, taking the associated tests, applying for the license, especially the studying, I first of all thought, why in the world do I need to know this stuff? And you may have been going through that as well. I became more fascinated with the idea that there's this, it's a small peek at a world that's out there that I had no idea about. I had no idea that you needed permission to go into certain types of airspace as, you know, if you're flying a drone commercially. I had no idea about what kinds of airspace there was. I had no idea about how weather conditions impacted flight. And so I learned a lot. Now you may not know this, but in terms of why you would have to take it, YouTube counts as a commercial venture for the FAA. And so they count YouTubers using drone footage on backpacking trips, which I'm likely to do, or YouTubers using footage to kind of do tent reviews or product reviews where you can do a flyover. Those kind of things do count as a commercial use of footage, and you are supposed to get a Part 107 license, as well as different things you may consider, like taking some real estate photography, so you can have a look at towers, those kind of things. Those all count as commercial ventures, and so you are required to get a Part 107 license for that. Now in the past, it seems that the FAA has not gone after YouTubers specifically, and it hasn't been a really big focus of the FAA, but I've seen a lot more videos recently in researching it, where in this downtime during, you know, how the world is right now during 19, seems like I've seen more videos of the FAA kind of reaching out to YouTubers, making sure they have their Part 107 license, especially if someone files a complaint. In terms of how you would apply for this, it's relatively easy. There are just a lot of different websites, it seems like, where I had to create certain accounts, and then I had to make sure I was doing the right application. I left a link down below that kind of walks you through all the different websites you should go to, and they do a fairly nice job, as long as you follow the directions, of making it fairly simple to apply for your Part 107 license. So I know that was a really bold claim by me, saying that you don't have to spend any additional money. Of course, you have the money to spend on taking the test, so that's $100 minimum. Most places, if you go to somewhere that's not a PSI, that's the company that runs the test, it's not a PSI center, it adds about another $50. So that's $150 just to take the test, typically. So why would you want to spend more than that if you don't have to? And I'm saying you don't. Ignore all the paid apps, ignore all the, you know, whatever it is, .com that says, hey, take my course for the Part 107 test. You don't need to do that. Of course, if you want to spend more money on that, you can, but there's enough information freely available out there that that's not really a requirement, or it's not something that you really have to struggle with saying, I really need this in order to pass. You don't. I was able to get a 95% on my test, and I'll show the image probably about here to prove that I did get that. The test is about 60 questions long, and you're allotted 2 hours to take the test. It took me about 40 to 45 minutes. I'll be quite honest, I probably should have, and I recommend people going over the test a second time since there's enough time there. But the test features bookmarks, so you can bookmark questions and go back to it later. I think I had about 8 or 9 questions that I thought, like, I wasn't quite sure it could go back one way or another. I didn't have a strong feeling about it. So I decided to bookmark those. I reviewed those. Once I was done, I was like, you know, let me get this out of here. And so I went ahead and finished up. And so it worked out well for me. So in terms of total study time that I had invested for me, I'd say about 8 hours. You probably could do an absolute minimum of 5 hours of study time to 10 hours of study time on the low end. If you need a little bit more than that, then feel free by all means to do that. The number one big tip is use YouTube. There are 3 spectacular videos that I want to recommend for sure in terms of studying. Tony Northrup has a very detailed and long video going through the study guide and specifically talking about numbers as well as some problem solving stuff that he talks about there quite a bit. Also, it's really, I consider it to be an underrated video when it comes to working on this stuff. It's Better B-Roll is the channel name, and he does a phenomenal job going through practice test questions, but he also answers and explains lots of different questions. So it's not just about memorizing and regurgitating. He actually goes through the kind of problem solving process for how they got to that specific answer. One big tip when you watch these videos, I don't want to forget, I think there's also a Gary the Drone Wizard video. These videos are all, of course, linked in the description below that I watched as well. It's not as good as the first 2, but you know, it's another resource that you have available to you. You can double check and make sure you know all the information on there as well. One big tip for using YouTube to practice is go ahead and watch those videos at minimum 1.5x speed, even up to 2x speed if you're familiar with the video or you've watched it at least one time. That's what I did. I'm pretty sure I watched both Tony Northrup's video as well as Better B-Roll twice, Tony Northrup's for sure, and I think I did maybe half of the Better B-Roll video twice. Gary the Drone Wizard, whatever that channel name is, that's one that I just only watched through one time, but definitely speed it up. The second tip after looking at those videos is to make sure that you are reinforcing areas that you consider to be a weakness. So for example, for me, once I went through, especially the Better B-Roll video, he did a very nice job of explaining METAR and TAF reports. And that's an area that took me once or twice going through those videos and those questions to really kind of nail down exactly what those reports are, how they're read. And I'll toss one up on the screen here probably so those of you who are watching can realize you probably are really confused by wondering what this confused mess of numbers and letters actually means. You have to make sure that you drill down deeper in those areas. Another big one for me is Class E airspace, figuring out where it starts at the ground level, and I watched 1 or 2 very short videos on that specific concept, trying to nail down exactly where it starts, why. And finally, sectional charts. That's another area I really had to go ahead and study a little bit more, and I watched a ton of videos on sectional charts, making sure that I knew exactly how to read them appropriately. And when you first see a sectional chart, you are going to be blown away because you're going to realize it's a mess and you have to be able to pick out what you need from that mess. Tip number 3 is to read the study guide. That's actually one of the first things that I did when I started studying. Is I did not start on YouTube. I started by reading the study guide, and I highlighted the areas that I thought were important. Things that after reading, I thought, you know what, that seems like it could be a question on the test. So I go ahead and highlight that, and I made sure I tried to memorize information that stood out to me first of all. When you're done, what I try to do is I use the study guide to kind of create flashcards for myself, pertinent information that was in the study guide that I thought was important, and I supplemented those flashcards from the study guide as well as YouTube videos for the things that are being covered. YouTube videos will not cover absolutely everything. That's something to keep in mind as well. One thing to be aware of though, and you definitely should read the study guide, if you print it out, there are linked documents on there. So for example, the actual Part 107 of that regulation is linked there. And so you should actually read that to make sure you're somewhat familiar with exactly what it covers. It won't show up in a printed document. It just shows, a blue link. Tip number 4 is to recognize that you have 2 types of learning that you have to focus on. The first is fairly obvious. It's kind of rote learning the type of learning where you just memorize a bunch of numbers, a bunch of concepts or facts, and you need to be able to regurgitate that in response to questions. Now that is definitely part of studying for this Part 107 test. The second part though is more of a problem-solving aspect, where you have to think about how that rote information that you learned can be applied to practical problems or questions. And so it's not just a regurgitation. They want to see if you know the concepts, you're aware of the concepts, and you can apply concepts. This comes up in the study guide, for example, when questions you've seen on practice exams where they say things like, does an aircraft propeller perform poorly or with high performance at high density altitude or low density altitude? So they want to see, can you apply your rote information that you've learned to a specific and practical question like that one? And the answer is, of course, you guys know this, but at high density altitude, which is actually low density air, I know, crazy, performance of the propeller actually goes down or decreases. And when I edit this, I'll have to watch that again just to make sure that's right. Tip number 5 is a simple one. Take a ton of practice tests. There are a lot out there. You're going to see a lot of similar questions sometimes as you go through the different practice tests. Just make sure that when you're going through them, just don't think that you have to memorize just the questions. Like I said before, it's practical application of rote knowledge. So you have to make sure that what you are doing is figuring out the concept behind the question. And you have to think about, okay, what does the FAA want me to know about this concept or about this specific question? What exactly are they trying to communicate to me? So that's it. Those are the 5 tips. You do not need to pay for a course. I just want to reemphasize that you can if it makes you feel more comfortable, but the videos that I linked down below, I took this test in 2021, and those videos, even though they were made, I'd say 3 to 4 years ago for some of them, the information still applies. You do not have to spend a dime. Make sure you hang on to your hard-earned money. If you don't need to give it to someone else, then why not? Hopefully this video was helpful for those of you guys who are planning on taking the Part 107 test. Let me know down in the comments if you've taken it already. And if you do end up taking it and this video is helpful to you, a free way to support the channel is to like the video and subscribe. I always appreciate it. And thanks for watching, guys. Peace.